All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the church, this beautiful space on a cold and snowy, icy day out there. Today's Express Sessions event is titled The Evolution and Preservation of Downtown Sag Harbor. I know this is a topic near and dear to everybody's heart here today, so I'm looking forward to it. My name is Gavin Manu. I'm the publisher of the Express News Group. We publish the Sag Harbor Express, of course, as well as the Southampton Press, the East Hampton Press, and the website 27east.com. We have these great panelists with us today. I will introduce them in a moment. But first, I do want to thank a few people. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody here at the church for being such gracious hosts. Eric and April, thank you so much. It's amazing what they've created here, and they have a wonderful team of folks. Sherry and Kristen and your entire team have been really welcoming, so thank you. I also want to thank the group of sponsors who have been with us really from the beginning of these events, which we've been doing for about 8 years now. The presenting sponsor of the Express Sessions is Rocco Carrero Wealth Partners. I think Rocco is probably finding a parking spot right now because he was going to be here. But Rocco's a tremendous supporter of ours. He's a really sharp guy. His main office is in Southampton, and I definitely appreciate his support. Also, the session leaders of the events are the Adam Miller Group, which is a law firm based in Bridgehampton. I think I saw Denise out there, and yep, thank you, Denise. And Advantage Title also, which is a title firm with their main offices in Riverhead. Chris Snuzzy, Brittany, I see in the back. Thank you so much for all your support. And I'd also like to thank our session partners, Saybrook Capital, Zappola Construction, Dayton Ritz and Osborne Insurance, Sand Pebble Project Management, and the law firm of Toomey, Latham, Shea, Dubin, and Quartararo. Thanks to our sponsors. What's that? You left Kelly out. Oh, how could I leave Kelly out? Yeah, I hope Chris isn't here. We also have a group of Sag Harbor businesses that support us, actually really organizations. The church, of course, as I mentioned, is a sponsor of today's event, as well as the Sag Harbor Partnership, which I think we'll talk a lot about today, a wonderful organization that has just done tremendous good here in the community. They've supported our events this year. And the Sag Harbor Chamber of Commerce, which I know is an organization many of you in the room are members of. The new president, Marilyn Holstein, is out there. Thank you, Marilyn. And everybody at the chamber really is working hard. They've got Harbor Frost coming up next weekend. They have an event at the Sag Harbor Cinema next Friday night, so go on out and support them. Thank you again to the sponsors. And also our media partners, WLIW-FM, these fine folks over here, Brianna and Kyle are with us today. WLIW is Long Island's only NPR station based in Southampton Village. They have a unique blend of news, music, entertainment, really local stuff based here on the East End. And you can find them on their FM dial, 88.3, 88.7, and 96.9, and on their website, wliw.org/radio. Thank you, Brianna, Kyle, and everybody at WLIW. Also, lastly, after our discussion today, we can stick around for a little while. We have some refreshments, and Cavagnolas gave me a beautiful cheese tray that we can all nibble on afterwards. So thank you to Michael and his team over there. So as for today's discussion, where is he? No. As for today's discussion, Sag Harbor's business district has been evolving for ever probably, but really at a pretty fast pace the last few years with, some longtime establishments sold or listed for sale. And our hope today is to talk about what those changes mean for the village's future and to discuss some of the development pressures and efforts to preserve space for independent mom and pop stores or unique places that make this village so special. So I'm going to introduce the panel, which will be helpful in this conversation, starting, of course, with Sag Harbor Village Mayor Tom Gardella. Thank you, Tom. Sag Harbor Village trustee Gene Kane. Thank you, Gene. Fred Thiel, who is a board member of the Sag Harbor Partnership and, of course, our former state legislator. Thank you, Fred. Lisa Field, who is the owner of the Sag Harbor Variety Store. Thank you, Lisa. Grania Cohen, who is the owner of Kids Quit Brewing Company and is also a member of the Sag Harbor Planning Board and the Sag Harbor Board of Education. Thank you, Grania. And Sean Sachs, who is a Sag Harbor resident and an advocate on local issues. Thank you, Sean. I also believe I saw Bob Plum here today, Sag Harbor Village trustee. Thank you, Bob. And I know some others. I think actually Robert Truehold, all the way from the village of Quogue, is with us today. Robert, thank you so much. And so with that, we're going to get started. We will have a microphone. Ellen will bring it around. If you want to contribute questions, comments, just flag down Ellen. She'll come to your seat with a microphone. Please introduce yourself. Please try to be brief because we have a lot of us here today. And we'll continue the conversation that way. So moderating today's event is the consulting editor of the Express News Group, Joe Shaw. Joe?
Sorry. Thank you, Gavin. I'm excited about this. I love coming up here. Can I have, give me that sheet. Love coming to Sag Harbor to do Express Sessions events because I would hasten to say that of all of the villages and hamlets on the South Fork, this is the community that is ready to have this kind of conversation anytime, anywhere. You love talking about this stuff. And I think it's because Sag Harbor remains very unique. It's a unique part of the region. And holding on to that uniqueness is a big part of what we're talking about here today. So I'm the least important person in the room, so I'm not going to talk much. And I want to make clear that you guys are very important, and we want to have everybody involved in the conversation really from the start. I'm going to introduce each of the panelists, let them say a few words just so you can hear them speak. But then we really do want to open it up. I want this to be a wide-ranging conversation. We're talking about the future of the downtown and the evolution of the downtown, and there's probably no more important topic to discuss. It's a complicated topic, so let's just dive in. So, Mayor Gardello, let me just start by asking you, where are we as far as the downtown? Do you see it as in crisis? Are we approaching crisis? Like, how bad are the problems that we're going to talk about today?
So I wouldn't say that we're in crisis right now. I think a lot of the things that we implemented in the 2008 comprehensive plan have helped as far as limiting the square footage in the village business district. But there's some measures that we want to take, and we're going to start next month. We've already passed legislation with the storefronts, any vacant storefront. You can't just black out the windows. There has to be some type of display put up so it's not just a cardboard or blackened out area. One of the things I've been meeting with InterScience, Mr. Rich Warren, and our counsel, Liz Vale, for the last probably 3 months to discuss this issue and the approach to maintaining the character. What our goal is to maintain the character of the Village Business District. Keep it so that it's more focused towards small mom and pop stores. There are, believe it or not, some chain stores already in the village. I mean, you could say the IGA, right? Chavoni's Market, even though it's run by a local family is. You've got Grindstone Donuts. There's a couple of others I know I'm missing. There's, I think Budaberry has a couple stores. Love Shack, Fancy, Goldberg's, which is a local chain, right? You see Goldberg's all over the East End. Henry Lear. So there are some of those stores that are in the village. One of the things that
chain stores,
they're considered, right? Yeah. Because they're multiple locations. But what we're going to do, and we're going to start this month with legislation that I asked to be introduced, which is right now in the code, the limit is 2,000 square feet with the ability to extend that or increase it to 50%, up to 50%. So you could go from a 2,000 square foot store to a 3,000 square foot store. I'm going to take that out and keep it at 2,000. Now, it won't affect anybody that's currently, your pre-existing non-conforming. But in the future, I want to take that out. And again, this is going to be introduced to public. The other thing is to shorten the store fronts. Right now in the code, you can go up to 50 feet per storefront. I'm going to lower that to 25 feet. And what that'll do is that'll prevent somebody from coming in, buying 2 stores next to each other, combining it and making it a bigger store. That's another deterrent. That's basically, these are measures to maintain the look and character of Main Street. So my approach is to put these code changes in, see what we can do with the code to maintain the character. We need to update our inventory on the stores because stores come and gone since that 2008 study, see who's here, what the square footage is, what the uses are. So we're in the process of doing that. You know, InterScience is going to do that for us. And I do have our council working on if there's a local law that we could pass to discourage or limit the amount of chain stores in the village. And that's more of a difficult task because we can't write legislation that says, oh, we don't want the Gap, or we don't want this store, or we don't want that chain store. It has to be worded in such a way that it's not challenged and overturned, or challenged and the village gets in a lawsuit.
But one of the problems is when you talk about chain stores, there's a big difference between Budaberry
and
CVS
Target or Target or something like that.
Yeah.
So we're working to see what local law we could pass to prevent that. But it's not. I don't want to pass something just for the sake of saying we put something on the books. I want to make sure it has teeth, and we're going to keep the ball rolling with these changes to the code to keep the character of the village the way it is. At least keep the storefronts and the size to where we want it.
We'll dig into that as we go forward.
So I just want to say one thing
Sure,
before
absolutely.
you move on, Joe. I think that we missed the former mayor, LaRocca, is here.
Yes.
And also former Mayor Mulcahy. So I just wanted to recognize
Welcome
them.
to both of you.
Who I happen to work with both mayors.
Terrific. Good to know. Gene, so we talk about the character of the downtown. Can we delineate for a second what the threats are that threaten the character of the downtown? What are we working against? What's the village working against? What is the biggest threat to that character?
I think the concern is when you see a largely financed.
Oh, can you slide the mic a little closer?
Oops, sorry. When there's an institution that is largely financed and could come in and make a lot of changes. And we can look at one or two examples. I'm not going to go into any specifics because we'd really not like to talk about any particular owner or store. But when we see that, we need to make sure that we hold them accountable to be following the codes that we do have. And as Mayor Gardella just said, there's a couple changes that we look to put in place, which we think will be helpful. But if you look to see right now, if you look at the code that we do have, you have the combination of all the boards playing their role. And their role is in many ways to help preserve the character that we have and the look and the feel, and as we always say, the eclectic, the quirky, what Sag Harbor really is. But to really think about also not putting in limitations that are going to slow down a business to thrive. We need to be balancing that piece as well, because it is key that the businesses are going to be able to make it, because these market dynamics that are going on right now, we can't really control. It's the code that we have that can help slow things down, or partnering with different entities. And, if one example that just pops up to me is when the fire happened in 2016, the combination of Sag Harbor Partnership coming together, those people that donated, as well as the combination of having Southampton Town CPF put in a large investment to buy the easement, the preservation easement, as well as the development rights. Those kinds of partnerships and working together, the comment is always it takes a village. Well, that took more than a village, and these are the things that we have to look for to continue to keep the character that we have now. And with that, I would have to say my hat's off to Fred, because he was really very, very instrumental in putting the CPF funds together. And I think we need to look to see how and when and where we can continue to find these kind of partnerships to continue it.
Fair to say that the village's role is to create some guardrails
I would say that's a good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good way
I
to
mean,
put it.
there are guardrails there.
We've done
We
pretty
have 'em.
well.
Make
We have.
sure they're up to date and,
Right.
and
We need
and
to relook
evolve.
at our inventory, see what we have, what stores are on Main Street, because Main Street has changed from 2008, to see what stores are in place now, what the square footage is, where is the possible, where could we run into trouble? Or
because
where is
it's
there
the first
potential?
line of defense, right? The
Right.
village
So,
codes are the first.
And
line
this
of
first law that's being a code change that's being introduced is to preserve that feel, that character. Let's keep it at the 2,000. There's only a couple of uses that are allowed to go up to 3,000, like the hardware store, the grocery store, and a home furnishing store, so to speak, like Fisher's, say.
And those that are there are grandfathered.
Right, they're already grandfathered in. So the idea is to let's maintain the character, the structure of that feel of Main Street, and this is gonna be open to public input from the public. We're gonna introduce the code changes and see what the public has to say. But I think it's a good first step, and we're gonna do it right away.
Fred, you've got a lot of perspective on this. You've been part of village government. You've been part of state government. You're now on my staff as a columnist. You've been a resident of Sag Harbor pretty much for your whole life. Tell us what your perspective is on this question. It's a real challenge to try and preserve a place that's under this kind of pressure.
Well, I figure like I should start by saying my name is Fred T. and I'm a recovering politician. And I was doing really well for about a year, but now I'm backsliding into this. So, but in any case, yeah. But listen, I grew up in Sag Harbor. I've lived here my entire life. People know how strongly I feel about Sag Harbor and the things that make it special. And suffice it to say, I can say this now. 2 years ago I would have said I love all my children equally, but today I'll say, to me, Sag Harbor is one of the most successful, if not the most successful, downtown hamlet village on the east end of Long Island. And through the years, it's benefited from a dedicated citizenry, which we still have. I don't know about the rest of the world, but participatory democracy is alive and well in Sag Harbor, and that certainly we see that's here today. And I think that's the biggest resource that we have, is that the people that live here care about this village, and you see that whether it's the local volunteer fire department or the Sag Harbor Partnership, crazy people that want to be both on the school board and the planning board at the same time, things like that. People care about Sag Harbor, and we've had, it is a special place, and it's been described, but, we benefit on the East End by having a Main Street that's not Montauk Highway. We have the waterfront right there in downtown. There was the foresight, 50, 60 years ago to have a sewage treatment plant, which I think has been critical to the success of the village of Sag Harbor, and the predecessors to the current village government saw it fit to have a federal historic district here. So we've had all of those things, and we've had great success. So my perspective on it is that change is inevitable. This was a whaling village, and then there was a depression here. This was a factory town. When I grew up here, Boulevard was right down the street. Now it's multi-million-dollar condos. But that changed. It was no longer a factory town. And so, but what I think has been some of the secret of the village is that the village government and the citizenry together have always worked together, that when change comes, you can't stop change, but you can manage the change. And there's been this ability to manage the change here in Sag Harbor and to do it very well and to make things better in some ways. When I was growing up here, 1 out of every 3 storefronts was closed, and a lot of these historic houses were falling down. And, so we've had that benefit. But with those benefits come challenges also. And what I think has happened in the last 5 years is that the pace of change has quickened so much, and really out of the pandemic. I think the pandemic was rapid fire change to the east end of Long Island. And the statistic that I use is that, we mentioned the Community Preservation Fund. We have the Community Preservation Fund. And through most of the last decade, it would generate about $90 million a year for land preservation, which was put to extremely good use. It went down a little bit in 2019 to about 75 million because they took away the SALT exemption, and it kind of chilled the local real estate economy a little bit. But in 2019, it was 75 million, and in 2021, it was 225 million. Tripled. Real estate activity tripled, and that change is having this effect, in my opinion. And it happened so rapidly that I think it is happened so fast that initially it was going faster than we were able to manage it or respond to it. And what I think my perspective is, what this is all about tonight is, the pandemic is almost 5 years old, 5 years ago. We have caught our breath. We are seeing the changes that are happening in our community. And now we have to all come together again, like we did in 2009, and as we have done so many other times, to figure out, well, we know what we want the village to be, generally. I mean, nothing's unanimous in this village. Found that out a long time ago. But I think there's consensus, about that Sag Harbor has been successful, and we want to continue that success. And now the discussion is, how do we best do that? And, together I'm confident that now that we've had a chance to catch our breath, that we'll be able to do that.
Lisa Field, as a business owner and owner of arguably, I think, one of the real beloved businesses on Main Street. I think when people when people talk
I got bias, yeah.
When people talk about preserving the character, I think there are a couple of places they're thinking of, and your store's probably first in line. What do you, when you hear these conversations, what are you listening for? Because I would think as a business owner that all of this is going to affect, you've got to keep an ear open for unintended consequences, things that appear to be helpful but end up not being so helpful for business owners. How are you listening to this conversation, and what can you contribute?
Well, the first thing is, when you started off by saying Sag Harbor is in distress, is that the word you used? And I think Sag Harbor's so far from in distress. Like, I think we have the best village around, and we have great stores, we have great restaurants. Like, our Main Street, it's great. Like, I think the combination of everything that Sag Harbor is and has right now, when you're talking about a business, from the business point of view, it's unrivaled. Like, and if you look anywhere across the country, you're going to see, like, there used to be all these main streets, and they've just slowly gotten beaten down and gone away. And Sag Harbor is amazing that I think that we still have everything that we have. And Fred, to what you were talking about is during the pandemic, how real estate went through the roof. Well, that was great in one respect, but what that also meant was that we lost a lot of locals. So we lost our base of customers. And another thing during COVID, it really, everyone was pushing, buy things online, use a credit card, cash is bad. Well, let me tell you, cash isn't bad, because when you spend cash in the community, it stays in the community. The bank's not getting a percentage of it. And so there were a lot of things that happened through, during COVID that did affect the way that, like, businesses change. But Sag Harbor's great. Like, we've got great stores. And I think what we need, though, if you look around now, we need customers. And it's like people turn out when, like, things seem really desperate, and it's like, oh no, we love this store, we love that store. You know what? If you love the Wharf Shop and you have a kid's birthday party, go to the Wharf Shop and buy that. Look there first before you go to any other options. If you like, it's great. We have a grocery store right on Main Street, and yeah, it's not King Cullen, but go support Scavone. It's not saying that you have to do it all day, every day, but just keep that in mind. And I think now more than ever, people just need to be aware of that in order for businesses to stay, you can pass all the laws you want and you can make all the restrictions, but Main Street's not a museum. Like, we're living, thriving. Like, this is how we're supporting our families. And we really just need the support of the community. And Sag Harbor's got a great community, and we've got a great local base, but we seem to just be losing those locals each year. More and more people are selling their homes and going elsewhere. So I think a real big part of it is just supporting what you love. And, go if you like Paige, go to Paige and, maybe not go 3 nights a week, but make sure you go once a week. You know what I mean? Just hit the different spots in town and just show your support.
Grania, Kid Squid is compared to some of the businesses in town, is a relative newcomer. By the way, we're going to talk about your being on the planning board and school board, and we may have an intervention. Okay. Yeah, we may do an intervention later because, my God bless you for being on those panels. But I want to talk about Kid Squid and what you have found. You've arrived in the Village Business District and become a big part of it, I think, in a fairly short period of time. Tell us what your perspective is as a newcomer. Maybe bring your microphone a little closer just to be safe.
I mean, first of all, I couldn't agree more with Lisa that I think Sag Harbor is a wonderful place and is doing extremely well. But we do have potential challenges, and it's also great. We have such a good, thoughtful administration who's thinking ahead to some of those potential challenges. And when we have one of the best main streets, I know technically we're not on Main Street, but close enough, one of the best main streets in the country, I'd say, not just the East End, and it's a wonderful treasure. The challenges for small businesses, obviously those of us who don't own our property, increasing rates, rents, a victim of your own success of Sag Harbor doing so well is that property prices have gone higher. And thankfully, there's families who haven't sold, like the Buckings, and still run these great stores. And then for new businesses coming in, it's a challenge to keep affordable things to the public and still be able to, pay the rent and the insurance and the staffing and everything else that goes with it. So I'm extremely grateful we have an administration who's thinking through that. And I would delineate a Buddhaberry and a Grindstone very much from a national chain. I think Grindstone started here and opened a second store in East Hampton, and I think they're an incredible asset to the village, and they're, run by great local people who live relatively locally. Versus, we all saw. And in response, we've seen the boarding up, but we all saw the national shoe chain who put up brown paper in the winter as soon as Labor Day hit and said, see you next season. And if they could have been more tone deaf to this community, I don't know how they would have done it. So the fact that we're thinking ahead to that, I think, is huge. And that, we're putting in regulations that won't become too cumbersome to an individual business owner who's a mum and pop and it's just Rory and I who own Kid Squid. It's just 2 of us. So, not putting in regulations that's going to make it so hard, because if that happens, and the small businesses can't afford to be here, it would just be national chains who can afford to have a money-losing storefront because it's good for their brand and their business to be associated with a cool place like Sag Harbor. So I applaud the administration for thinking, very thoughtfully about that, where those smaller stores and businesses can continue to, flourish and work away at, building Sag Harbor. And just on a small note, as far as opening Kid Squid, it's been honestly touching, and I think Rory would say the same. I honestly feel like we've been so welcomed by the community, and we've become like a place for the community to get together, and as many things as we can support in the community we do, and we feel extremely privileged to live here as newcomers and be raising our family here.
I think it demonstrates, too, that the village is open to new businesses and welcoming to folks who come in and want to do it the right way. So good to hear that. Sean Sachs, I see you as sort of the objective panelist. You are a resident, and most people in the room know you. You're behind the scenes. You're an advocate. You're a very analytical guy, I know. So what do you bring to this conversation? What are the questions you want to ask about where the village is going?
Well, first I wanted to say to the "it takes a village" comment. I am a newbie. As is hearing some of this on the panel, I'm like, oh man, I'm part of the problem. That's
why you're here, Sean.
The pandemic leave behind. Nobody told me till now, and it's very clear why I'm here. But I like Grania, I feel extremely blessed to have what happened to us here in this community. We didn't see it coming. And now, my family lives here. My kids go to Sag Harbor Elementary. I'm incredibly grateful for what I've gotten. And so this idea of participating in whatever the issues are in the community and the folks that need help has been, especially in this moment of the world burning, this wonderful civic joy element that I feel very, very blessed to be part of. And my experience, we are so lucky to have a local government that's so active and attentive to the issues that are going on in the village. We are so lucky to have someone like Fred, who's basically a legend of local state politics and has done more for our community and our state than I think anybody. We're incredibly blessed to have the local media we have. You guys having this conversation, it's just a reminder of how important supporting local media is. Having the businesses on Main Street that we have, and I love that it was pointed out, and this is part of what I think I need to help communicate to my peers. You can't just say I hope they're open in February. You need to participate. You need to not click that every day Amazon and come down to Main Street and support the things that you love. And so I think the residents, the newer residents, have an obligation to participate in this conversation. It's very important. I think something like this really helps communicate some of these things to the folks. And I agree we have to be aware of change and be careful about things and participate in a partnership, because some of the forces of change are economically massive and have a lot of power, and it's going to take this coming together. But in the case of Kid Squid and Grania and Rory, some change is great. They've added some. I like their beer, but more importantly than that, they add something to this town that's incredibly special. The space that we're sitting in here, this is new. What Eric and April have done in this town, the first thing that I got involved in was helping to rebuild the cinema with them, and really kind of learned a lot about what it meant to participate in our town. So change can be great. This place is amazing. I'm so lucky to have the cultural and arts institutions we have in this town, but we have to support them. So yeah, I want to make sure that this doesn't just fall on government, doesn't just fall on local businesses. I think town residents, and I guess in my case, newer town residents, need to do their part too. And I think that's what I hopefully bring here, instead of being part of a problem.
Awesome. So we're going to open it up now. Ellen can come around with the microphone. If you have a question or a comment, please raise your hand. As we're doing that, I'll ask Fred. So I always say I have a couple of things that I say a lot, and one of them is that when the question is why, the answer is always money. That's the answer to every why question. Is that the answer to the question here today too, that why is Sag Harbor concerned about the future? Why should we be worried about things changing? Is it about money?
No, I do not think it's about money. Well, I guess on one level everything's about money, right? But I don't think the concerns that are being expressed and where we are, I don't think it's about money. It is about it's more about a way of life. And we talk about formula stores or chain stores, but the legal part of that, as Liz Vale will tell you, is the difficulty is defining what the hell that is. Because Goldberg's or whatever, it's more than that. It is local business people, local stores that have a stake in the community and having them being able to stay here. And so it is not so much, how many of these are there. And it is really about supporting local business. people that, as was said, their money is going to stay in the community, and they're going to send their kids to the school here, and then somebody's going to join the fire department, and so I think that's what it's about. It's not about money, it's about the soul of the community. And the soul of the community is having a community where there is a grocery store on Main Street, where there is a hardware store on Main Street, where there is a brewery on Main Street or near Main Street. But those kinds of local businesses, and they are part of the community.
But Fred, it does come down to money.
Well,
honestly, it really does, because it's nice to say that, but the ultimate reality is that
it comes down to money. And you finished. Go for it.
Okay. Well, no, the reality is that if I open a business and I can make $10,000 a year running my business, and I work 7 days a week and I make $10,000 at the end of the year, or I sell my real estate that I've purchased and I can make $100,000 or what the numbers don't make sense that I'm using, but you have a multi-million-dollar piece of real estate, and it's like, wow, I could just sell that. I don't really, then I get the money and I don't do any work, or I can just continue to keep working. So if the balance isn't there, if it's not worth the owner's time and effort and sacrifice to continue, it does boil down to money.
Well, it boils down to money.
In my case.
Everything boils down to money. And, right now, and Lisa, I think you would agree with this, that if you don't own your own real estate, if you don't own the building and you're paying rent, you're good luck.
Challenge.
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing about money, and you have to find workers. And as Joe says, every discussion on express sessions, if traffic will get mentioned and affordable housing will get mentioned. And that's part of, and that's about money too.
I've
But
been
if I
instructed
can
not to
just
let
then-
this turn into an affordable housing conversation.
But
Go ahead.
We could change
It
that.
is part of being part of the community too, though, because my parents bought the business in 1970, and they had 4 young kids. I was one of them. I was the baby when they bought it, and their goal was to support their family by living here and being part of it. And my mother was involved with the LVIS. My father was involved in the Lions Club. Almost every member of my family has held a position in the Chamber of Commerce. So we are ingrained in the community, and so it's it's not that it's just it's all about money. But the bottom line, the aging population, it does become about the aging business owners.
Let me clarify my point too. When I said it's about money, what I mean is the pressures that the village is facing is about Lisa's family came to become part of the community and to run a business in the community. If you have a successful business community where someone from wherever can come in and make a whole lot of money and not necessarily be part of the community, that's part of where your stresses come from. I think that's the point. That's what I meant about it being about money, is the stresses on the business district are about the quick buck and about the real estate dollar rather than the ongoing dollar. Have you seen that, Mayor?
Look, I hate to single out a certain store, but when you get a storefront that says "See you in the summer," and takes off, and the owner's part, I think he lives in North Haven. I think he's somebody that lives locally. Like that's exactly the opposite of what Lisa's family did. So you need to. And I said this I was at a fire district meeting the other night, like a lot of the local officials need to step up. I don't want to turn this into affordable housing, but that's what the discussion was. But Sag Harbor is a small village, 2.2 square miles. We can do things to help that area. I hate to get off topic, but the ADU, the accessory apartments, we had 6 new members join the fire department. And I hear the stories about families that are now able to stay because they created an apartment. So the community, I think the community's still there and it's strong. The Sag Harbor community's there, and we do have really good people in the business community.
And there are things you can do.
There are things that we could do to preserve the character, the size, the look. We want to change, like Sean said, changes, and Fred said this very poignantly. Change is not always a bad thing, but we want to be able to make sure that it fits in the character of the village.
Right, the size,
That's the
and
key.
The size and the scale,
Right.
and the type of business is one that would add, like Kids Good did, and does, as opposed to detract or, really cause a new change to it. And we are aware, when we talk about, and I was mentioning some of the tools that we do have, when projects come in and they have to evaluate if they are looking to add a number of new seats in a restaurant, then we have to look for parking spaces. If they don't have parking spaces, maybe they don't add. So then it's the traffic piece, it's the parking piece, it's how can we influence. And we just recently, in September, reestablished the parking and truck unloading spaces, that there will now be, if an applicant goes in front of the zoning board to get a variance, they will now be responsible for putting $10,000 in it. So, this was there, and then it was abandoned for a while in 2009. Now we brought it back. So as we know, as we say, things are going to keep changing, and we, as the administration, have to keep changing with it.
Just to expand on that, Gene. So having discussions with our planner, with Rich, and talking about that parking fund, here's something that we need to fix, because consequences of something you do, right? Or potential consequences. We need to limit that. In other words, somebody comes in and they need 10 more parking spaces. Do we want to collect $100,000? Where are we getting these? And the business is bigger than the village can accommodate? We want to limit that. It was basically set up so if you need a parking space or 2 parking spaces, but not to accommodate somebody who needs 100 parking spaces. So that's something that we passed that needs to be codified and say we're going to limit it to a certain number of spaces. So this is why I'm saying you have to be careful when you put something together, and don't pass something just to pass it. You have to make sure that it has teeth and it's going to benefit the community.
And that there aren't unintended
There
consequences.
are unintended
Exactly.
consequences.
Let's bring in someone from the audience. Can you introduce yourself, sir, please?
Hello, yes. My name is Tim McGuire. I've been on the Zoning Board of Appeals in Sag Harbor for 10 or 12 years now. Something that I think that we need immediately, a lot of what we're talking about is kind of theoretical. We have 3 big projects that are within 100 feet of Main Street right now. 2 of them, the owners of them have invested $30 million each. The other one is family-owned, and they're sitting on land that's worth $10 million plus. They come to the village with their plans that they've spent 6 months or longer working on, and we send them back with some comments and ask them to come back. I think instead what we need is an update on the master plan, but beyond that, what other villages have done, something that I would just call a pattern book, where instead of waiting for a developer to dream something up without any guidance for us, that we come up with some specific looks for the various areas of the village that are under development right now, that describe with illustrations and photographs and artwork what we want it to look like. We're not saying to the architect and then to the developer that it has to be this specifically, but Gene used the phrase that our current Main Street is eclectic and quirky. Well, we need to put something together that's visual, that will translate to the developers and architects. We recently got some samples of what the developer is planning for the K-Pasa 7-Eleven buildings. And after several months of that developer going around and meeting individually with each of the boards and getting input, we all thought that they would come back with something that was quirky and eclectic. But instead they came back with something that to me just looks like a vanilla type project that could be on any place on Long Island and had nothing whatsoever to do with Sag Harbor. If we had had something for that person to use in the beginning that was a broad guideline of what to expect, I think we would have gone a long way in getting there. So the developers invested 6 months, time is money. We keep sending them back, and we often say, well, we can't design it for you. Well, no, we need to design it for them, not specifically, but generally.
Can I ask you a
Thank
question, Tim? Actually, go ahead. I want to make a point. This has nothing to do. I think your points are perfectly valid. I do want to say there's a couple of fairly major projects that are before the village right now. It's going to be very difficult for us to have a conversation about those specific projects because the folks on the panel are in the middle of considering them. So we're going to have to walk a little gently on those subjects. I just want to say that as a up front so we don't do it. But my question, Tim, to you actually, before you sit down, sorry, is how do you legislate quirky? Like, I mean, in a sense.
You don't have to legislate it.
Yeah. How do you do that, though?
Most of the developers that I've run into, they would like to have some guidance. A lot of them don't really care what it's going to look like. I mean, they want it to be attractive for renters that are going to be, so obviously they want it to look good, but they're not wedded to one specific thing. If they had something that was visual, that gave them in a very general way what the village is looking for, most of the time, I think they would go along with it. They're not frustrated architects or designers. They're business people.
And you mentioned
they want it to happen quickly. They're not going to meet with the boards once a month for a year to keep going over and over and over something. They want it to come in and say, oh, that's great. That's just what we wanted. And they can go move on with their project.
And you mentioned a pattern book, so that could be.
This has been done in other villages, and
here's 4 different options. You can take any of those 4.
There are samples of what those pattern books look like.
Sure.
I just wanted to say to that point that I think what a lot of these developers are finding out is they spend a tremendous amount of money to purchase these properties without even knowing what's on the books, what the code is. There's certain things you cannot do in this village. And then they're asking for things that it's impossible to grant. So what we have right now is working to an extent. I think you're going to find that some of those projects are going to pull back what they've applied for a great deal because they're realizing that it's not going to happen in this village. They had this idea. I mean, I talk to a lot of people. I know a lot of people that have a lot of resources, and they see these people buying these properties for a crazy amount of money. And they know the codes, they know what they can do, and they're like, this doesn't add up. How is this going to work? The business model just doesn't work. So the market is way ahead of what reality is, and it needs to come back down to where it's supposed to be. And by putting these, I think, by putting these little changes in or making the code, keep the village to look a certain way, that's going to affect the market. It has to.
Fred, you want to?
Yeah, again, we're not going to talk about specific applications and things of that nature, but it raised a point when I was listening to Tim, and the village board enacts the code, very important. But the code, the zoning code, the village code, it's a blunt instrument. Okay, it is, gives you the general regulations. What a community looks like is a function of that, but even more so, it's a function of every week, every month, planning boards, zoning boards, harbor committee, historic preservation, architectural review board, decision by decision, cumulatively, that's what ultimately decides what your community looks like. These boards have incredible discretion. There's the code, and then the boards have discretion, and parameters with which they operate in, and it is powerful, the authority that they have. They're extremely important. So, to Tim's point, whether it's a pattern book or an update of the master plan, the comprehensive plan, those kinds of tools, whatever you can give those boards to better execute the vast power that they have, I think that is something that should not be overlooked.
Grania, I wonder if I could bring you into the conversation as a planning board member. What do you think of this conversation? Would something like that help you as a planning board member if there were some guidance ahead of time?
That specific thing is probably a better question for the architectural review board, because the planning board is not really in charge of the look and feel of something. Sure. It's a very different kind of set of parameters. So that's more the ARB. But, to Mayor Gardella's earlier point about limiting square footage, to, the partnership's incredible work through the years in this village, and, we all know the stories of CVS from years ago and what could have been and could have really changed the makeup here. I think those are the very thoughtful things that you have to take on board, especially for kind of larger developments, and how to help preserve the village's integrity and look and feel. And I'm also would agree certainly with the parking comment that just came up. Granting a small business owner an opportunity to be able to add a couple of spaces they don't have because they're looking for a small change of use is vastly different than a developer who might be proposing something that will need an extra 70 spaces in a tiny village. And so I think that's a very sensible way to be looking at these things, on a smaller footprint and with guidelines along that way. And then, one thing I kind of would add to that, because it's been a frustration of mine, kind of watching things in the village, I see so much misinformation posted on social media. It's kind of overwhelming to me. And, there's a lot of people who complain, or they say, you should just say no to this, and without understanding the structure of the system and how these things work. So, there's a lot of code in the village, and we need to be looking at it constantly and updating it with all of these thoughtful things in mind. But there are multiple boards in the village, and so these things aren't going to just pass because somebody's got money. They have to look at the code. They have to go through the system. And in the same vein, you also can't just say no to somebody. Otherwise, this village would be under constant lawsuits, and that would cost the village substantially more money. So, going through thoughtfully with these projects and understanding them. But certainly for the developers, if they are going to take on something bigger, it would behoove them to understand the code in advance.
Yeah, we'll stipulate. Social media sucks. Yeah.
Hi, this is Trustee Bob Plum. I wanted to make 2 points. I wanted to revisit the issue of the chain store law, or the potential of it. Nantucket's had one for 20 years, and it's never been challenged. East Hampton has one, and East Hampton Village has one. And the purpose, and it's very specific, if you read the laws, it talks about uniforms, it talks about stores, other stores within a radius, and it's pretty specific. And the real idea is, for instance, a McDonald's or a Taco Bell or CVS, and how that would change the feel, the look and the feel of, say, Main Street. And it hasn't been challenged in any of those municipalities yet. And I think that that's what we need to address, at least get it out there and head that off. Because as you say, some of these larger buildings, if they happen, they're going to have a lot of space to rent. And who knows what'll come there. And by the way, I just want to add one more thing. I think it's Gucci or Tiffany bought one of the buildings on Newtown Lane and Main Street in East Hampton. And they're like $10 or $15 million. Clearly, they're not trying to make that money back from those locations. They're buying advertising. And we mentioned the shoebox. Well, it's the same thing. In some ways, it doesn't matter for someone. The size is a good thing, limit is a good thing to have, but it's not necessarily effective for keeping chains out. And again, when I refer to change, I really more mean like the aesthetic setback that would be. And that's my point. Thank you.
Mayor, I'm going to let you answer. Look, just to clarify, the village doesn't have a chain ban at the moment, does it?
We don't have a law that says you can't have a chain in the village, but the code the code that's in place, the limits to square footage. Another big one, and because this gets to Bob's point, is the use table. The next thing what we're working on now is to make the use table, so the bank, for instance, if the bank sells, it can only be a bank. So whoever comes in there has to be a bank. You can't carve the thing up to multiple stores and have multiple uses. So that's a way to put something in the code to prevent that sort of thing from happening. You have a grocery store that's so many square footage. If the grocery store gets sold, it has to be a grocery store. So that in itself maintains the character of the village. We did look at the law from Nantucket, and there were some issues with that. that could be challenged. We're in the state of New York. I don't know if you know, but it's a very,
Yes.
it's a very,
I keep track of
it's a
those
very
things.
litigious state.
I keep
And
track of this thing.
I'll just point out that we stole the Community Preservation Fund from Nantucket. But I like to say they invented it, we perfected it.
Best
but-
practices.
That's it. But I just, on the issue of formula stores, chain stores, it really, there are actually statutes across the country that deal with this particular topic. And, they have been upheld in other places. There really is no case law in New York. In fact, back around 15 years ago, I sponsored a bill that would have made it clear that such regulations were, that local governments could do them. So it is, as I said before, the tricky part of this is in the definition and how you define that, because I hate to put it this way, but I'm going to. In defining what it is a chain store, formula store, it reminds me of the Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart. He said with regard to pornography, he says, "I know it when I see it." That's not a definition, right? You have to have a definition. And that I'm not, and other communities have them, and it's kind of still an open question in New York State, whether they would be upheld if they're challenged. But and that's why the definition is important. So, in summary, a chain store law or a formula store law could be helpful in the village. But first of all, what are you looking to accomplish, and how you define it to avoid those circumstances of unintended consequences.
Right.
Sure.
I think the unintended consequences
Is what in a nutshell.
I think the unintended consequences are the hardest part, because if we said you could only make it up, you could only have 4 formula stores, this new bonbon candy store that just came in, that wouldn't be there, and it seems that that's been popular. Yeah. So, it's I got to be careful.
The idea may not to be to completely prohibit them. I think we think of it's yes or no. There may be some sort of middle ground there also.
Special exception.
Yeah. Special exception use.
Hard to write legislation that is that flexible, though, isn't it?
It is, but
not impossible.
Yeah, it's something.
I think flexibility is important, because also we live in a weird time of the pop-up store, and the size regulation is great to keep out of CVS, but any fancy brand is going to be very excited about opening a summer pop-up out here in a small footprint. So there's other towns that I think have been overrun by these things, and you can just see the kids have no place to go. It's like they're just kind of wandering the streets almost with no access to anything. And this town, walking down Main Street the other day, my daughter's like, 1832 floorboards? And we went into the wharf shop, and we spent an hour, and we bought books, and we had a great time, and we learned a lot about the town. I think there is a part of this that is in alarming stage, I think, and it all does tie together. Because very quickly, as the money comes in for some of these projects, the rents that they're looking for are only sustainable by a Gucci. I can buy my fancy white shirts in East Hampton. I don't want to buy them here. And so how we make sure that, we protect, and if there's got to be, you're talking about carve-outs, if there's got to be special situations where there's something that's important, the town comes together, the partnership comes together, people step up to protect. Because again, when this becomes when Main Street develops more towards just summer residents, I think that's when it starts to go. And you mentioned about families leaving. You can't drive around without being oh wow, that was a family. What's it being replaced by? And I think when you think about all these things together, why do people want to live here year round that are coming in that we need? We need their kids. It's the school. We got to invest in that. It's our environment and everything that we love about this place, and it's Main Street. And there's not a lot of folks that have come in that I know in the last 5 years that like are really excited about any of the other main streets, and they want to be around this. It's such an economic driver for everything else that exists here, and that's where the partnership piece comes. But I think it is a critical time for that. This could go very quick, and that's why it's good. I think we're having like this conversation.
Lisa, will you indulge me for a moment? I want to be dense. I actually think that's the definition of being a journalist, and it was kind of a calling. I'm sort of dense a lot of times. Gucci opens a shop down the street from you that's very clearly not designed to sell products and break even because they just want to be on Main Street. Why is that bad for your business?
Well, in theory, it's not, but it would be bad if, so let's say they're only there in the summertime, and then when they're closed 9 months out of the year, then that becomes bad for our business because it's not drawing traffic, or not people, customers, and so that's the downside. And we kind of even see that now, though. There are a lot of stores in town that close a couple of days middle of the week, and I get it. Like, sometimes you can go all day and not make a sale, but then people say, oh, Sag Harbor's always closed midweek, don't go there, or in January, February. Like, these are the worst months. They always are. But as far as, I don't know, if a Gucci opens up, the person that's going in to buy something at Gucci's probably not interested in coming into the 5 and 10. Whereas if it's in the IGA,
ironically, they may do it in an ironic sense.
But then somebody might be like, oh, I'm running to the grocery store to grab a loaf of bread, and I have to pick up poster boards, so I'm going to run into the variety store.
Gotcha.
Hi, Jim LaRocca. I used to be Jim LaRocca. You use the expression, you can't say no. I vigorously disagree with that. I got involved in village government, first drawn in by Mayor Brian Gilbride, then Sandra appointed me as trustee. I served with Kathleen, and then I did a 2-year term of my own. When Lou decided to sell the shipyard, there was a flood of people that wanted to come in there. 2 guys bought it, prominent people from New York, and showed me a plan for 20 condominiums. There's nothing in our code, our overlay district, or anything else that would allow them to build 20 condominiums on our oldest business lot with our most historic significance of this little seafaring community. I had to persuade them that they would not be able to do it. And there was a campaign about drugs that said, just say no. I said, just say no. My first victory there was when the 2 owners got in a fight about it, and one bought the other out. The answer continued to be no. What do we have there now? We have a national chain of marinas, which is unfortunately one of the things that's happening in the country. It's happening in Greenport, and they have invested a whole ton of money in there. They've rebuilt the shed. They want to talk to everybody in the corner about more slips. The point is, the village did say no.
It's not
condominiums. Walk yourself down from there all the way to the wharf, and then what is now Steinbeck Park. It took us 8 years to do Steinbeck Park. It passed through 3 different owners, 2 different town supervisors, 3 different mayors, and a couple of them came close. One was going to do what I can only describe as a brilliant Soviet style, looked like a Florida prison. That was one of the front page ideas that they had. And the same process had to go there. We just said no and no and no, and finally we were able to make Steinbeck Park with help from our spiritual leader, Fred Thiel. And this new project, this 46,000 square foot project will diminish and damage the character of this village more than everything you're talking about. Have you seen the pictures? Has anybody here seen the pictures? Okay. This project has been around for over a year. I have a copy of the pictures. They have not appeared in the newspaper. I honestly don't understand why, and I don't mean to be rude. But this is the 7-Eleven building, the Cape Pasa building, built large, 46,000 square feet. We're at about 2,000 square feet on Main Street. What is really behind this project? There is no way in physical science or any other way that they can build anything there that won't generate more parking than the village can possibly manage.
Jim, you're talking about things that require variances that are totally past village code, so why would that even happen? I mean,
But
there's
if
a
I
big
may.
difference between saying, oh, I just say no, or standing with the boards and the village code and everything that's needed. And if a project, and I'm not going to talk about any specific project, but if any project comes in and it's asking for multiple variances, then there's plenty of ways for the board to not let that, the different boards to not let that happen. And
Yeah, again-
there's a system in place.
Again, Jim,
that
I want
works.
to defend these guys. They're not going to be able to talk about this in detail, but that's also why the village needs to have the rules in place, right? So that the village can say no to certain projects.
Well, where I'm disagreeing is you have that power now,
But if
and you have had
if
it.
people just said no from day one because somebody bought a property without any reason behind it, what does that even mean? I mean, and you could get
Well,
sued.
what
There's
the village is
plenty of-
doing-
but
It has
to go through the process.
There's plenty of code in place. The variances that some projects, and not naming any specific ones, that are asking for are completely against village code. So
If I can,
they're not-
yeah.
why would they be granted? Why
Let
would
me let the mayor
Just
chime in.
a couple of history things that happen in history. So Jim, the marina, the yacht yard, right? It stayed a marina.
Right.
Okay. All the locals that were there got thrown out because the rates to rent the slip went through the roof. So yeah, it's still a marina, but all the locals got thrown out. So now, fast forward to now, as you know, working with Southampton Town and the village, we purchased the Redwood Marina, came up for sale.
Right.
We had CPF purchase it. The village is going to run it and maintain it. And those rates will stay low for residents of Southampton Town and Sag Harbor Village. So that's a win-win. That's something that's going to work for us. Okay?
And for perpetuity.
I think what you're going to find out is that I could come before the board, I could say I'm going to build this, I'm going to have these grand plans, okay? Because that's what my business model says I need to do. You're not going to get it through because there's stuff on the books that says it's not allowable. There's such a thing as a superstore code. That's just one of them that says you can't have multiple stores in one area. So I think what you're going to find out and what these individuals are finding out as they go through the process, it's not going to happen. And honestly, like, you have billions of dollars to invest. You didn't look at this first before you purchased these properties.
But is that common now?
I'm like,
Is that something you see more and more? That I think that point was made, that a lot of investment money is coming in without knowing the rules.
it's mind-boggling.
Well, I think a lot of these people think that because they have the funding and because they have a strong legal team, that they are going to be able to dictate what can be built.
And that's not the case.
That's really not the case. And when we think of all the things we think about the environment. So there's SECRA. If they can't pass SECRA, that's going to be a hurdle. I mean, these are all the different things. We've parking, what impact is going to have to the rest of the village. These are all the different points that the different boards go through, let alone the historical preservation of how is it going to look. It's all of that combined, and that's where I say we actually do have tools to help us. And to Fred's point, the importance of these boards and the decisions that they make have a lot of impact.
Yeah, I don't want to be the village attorney. I did that once, been there, done that. But just to contribute to this a little bit, the village board, when it's acting in a legislative capacity, passing laws, broad discretion. they can say no and not even have to explain why they didn't do anything, because it's legislative action. When the planning board and the zoning board and this historic preservation board and the harbor committee act, they have standards. They have to apply those standards. So if an applicant comes in and doesn't meet those standards, they can say no. But they have to follow the law that they've been given. So they're different situations. I just wanted to.
Let me give you the last word, and we'll move on.
Yeah, I'll finish up. The building between Beacon and the new monstrosities, townhouses, was a little house owned by Christy Brinkley. They came in looking for 11 variances. They got 7, and they built 2.5 stories where there was only 1 story. Our code failed in that case, and the board failed. When you go to a restaurant on Main Street that changes from apartments above to a second floor of the restaurant, impossible to provide parking as the code requires. Nevertheless, they gained approval. This new thing is talking about remote parking and so forth. We don't see that working anywhere. My only point is this: you can say no, and you do not have an obligation in the boards to negotiate in advance the changes that would make it acceptable, because you're starting from a premise is we're going to let you do something, just not that. How about we're not going to let you do that at all? That, I believe, is in our power, and I would invite this audience to find out everything you can about this, because what can happen, and I got yelled at by some of my former colleagues at the last one, by negotiating with them over time, reduce this, do that, and all of the rest, there will come a point, if they don't like the outcome, they will go to Article 78, and you will be vulnerable to losing a case on the being arbitrary and capricious after negotiating an outcome that does not conform with the code. So
That's quite an accusation, right there, that we're somehow negotiating with
I'm
applicants.
gonna take what Jim said as
I'm gonna leave it at that.
That you
but
have to be
that's
careful.
bizarre.
I think what he's saying is the village has to be careful not to present itself like it's negotiating. Let's leave
right,
it
we'll
at
leave
that.
it at that.
Let's go forward. Yes. Can you introduce yourself, young lady, please?
I'm Nada Barry, and I've owned the Wharf Shop on Main Street, Sag Harbor, for 57 years. But there's some things here that I think haven't been brought up, that the economy of the whole country has changed. And therefore, let's face it, in the retail field, and you've seen and watching, it's not only us with mom and pop stores here, but all over, in which the internet, Amazon, and tariffs have changed the way people feel, work, and function. Now, for us in Sag Harbor, I've been in the board meetings for 30-something years. We passed legislation to not allow any more real estate shops, places on Main Street, so it didn't become a whole real estate spot.
On the first one.
With a store like mine, if we don't continue, we're in a bind. We don't have younger people who are going to want to go into retail. Our affordable housing we won't get into. Our staff, which is also another problem out here. All these things are what are going to force the Main Street to become whatever. Let me leave it at that.
Now, can I ask you a question, Nada? With all of those headwinds, how are you still in business? What are you doing right?
To be honest, what am I supposed to say here? We're not in business still. We're going to have to support ourselves. I hate to tell you, it's been a disaster last 2 years in retail. You may have seen all these people on Main Street, they're spending less. It's easier, let's face it, to go on Amazon or internet and look for an item rather than shopping 6 places searching for it. We try to stay in business by being unique, giving service, free wrapping, and all these different things.
It's an
trying to be
experience, too.
individual.
Right? It's an experience to come into the workshop.
Yeah, and maybe we'll become a museum.
That gets back to Lisa's.
That's unsettling. I don't like to hear that. No. Go ahead. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Talk.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Eric Fischel. I got to sit down, though. I want to respond to a few things that were being said today. First of all, the model that Tim was proposing is a model that resembles the sort of feral mentality of architectural, sentimental, a sentimental exterior that looks like, it's all part of a historical progression of architecture, poorly built, super expensive, et cetera, for people who don't actually feel that they have an authentic relationship to the place they live in. It's all about looks, right? What Lisa was saying about the conflict between, business making X amount of dollars and a real estate value far greater than that. Were she to sell, she would lose who she is, which is something that we need to consider. The thing about community is that it's not about take. It's about being in a place and giving in that place. It's about giving rather than taking, and being able to survive in a way that you want to, that includes ambition, includes wealth making, et cetera, but it's a way you feel an identity for where you live. And that's something I think at the basis of what we're struggling with, is how do we keep what is authentic about Sag Harbor. Sean was saying he's new, Grenna's new, the Kid Squid's new. We're new in terms of our impact into the town, et cetera, et cetera. New is not a problem. The problem is vision for it, the way you actually commit to the place you live in. And what we're seeing represented is something where the places like Kid Squid, which is a small brewery, it's kind of would go into the sort of the handmade aspect of retail. You have Pretty in Pink, or whatever the hell that store's called. And it's again sort of along those same lines. It's got more stores, but it's something that is a very specific design concept, et cetera, et cetera. You have Comerford, which is sort of high-end design, but all within the handmade feel of it, the small manufacturing feel of it. Obviously, you have Fisher's and stuff, which is the same. All throughout, even Goldberg's is. It's something that stays within the integrity of a small deli rather than an extravagant chain, et cetera, et cetera. It's throughout the town we have this developing now. This has become an identity. The thing is,
how do you support that, Eric? How does the village support that image of the village?
Okay, so here's the big vision. You're talking to somebody who has zero business sense here, okay? But I got a vision. The thing is, what I'm seeing is, and I know this as is something that the cinema proved to me. There's with art, we create heat. We create something that attracts a lot of people to. They want to be in the heat, right? This is what's happening in Sag Harbor. There's this sense, this vibe that this town is unique because there's something creative going on in it. There's something they want to come see. There's something they want to be a part of, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. We're in a constant battle right now for the difference between people coming for that versus coming as a resort town, as Sean pointed out, where they're going to, you know, eat a Buddha berry or something, they're going to buy a t-shirt maybe, they're going to walk around, et cetera. They're going to be seen in the hipness of this moment, and then they're going to leave. We have a major change in rental in this town from long-term to short-term to you know, Airbnb stuff that's also, I think, killing the retail market. People aren't buying for the things they need for the long-term staying in a place. So it's impacting places like your store, Lisa. Yeah. So the thing is there a way of developing an economy that is something that becomes unique to Sag Harbor in a way that draws people here for specifically that? And it's something that I believe, even though I have zero idea how you would do it, that is based on creative output, that there's a product, a series of products that are made here that are identified specifically with Sag Harbor. You know, there's a general feeling, and looking across the economy, the country economy, towards smaller, handcrafted, authenticity, creative-based things. Is this something that we can participate in? We certainly have a lot of creatives out here. We have a lot of craft-based stuff. What we don't have is the building on Germain, which would be ideal for creating a factory of creative output. We just have to talk the guy out of it. You know, that we gotta say, those aren't luxury condos there. You know, you'd be stupid to waste your money there. Give it to us. Maybe we should get the town to buy that building. I'm just saying. Anyway, what I'm saying is that there is something that might be a model alternative to because I think people, what we need in a resort town is they don't necessarily come back, or they don't come back all the time. In something where people are living here, want to be a part of it, they're working towards it, they're living off of it, and people are coming because it's incredibly hot.
And arguably, Sag Harbor has been like that for a very long time. It was
Absolutely.
Always a little different. Fred, let me ask you this. Springboarding off of Eric's comments, you mentioned the CPF comes from Nantucket. Are there other communities that have approached this problem? And you're on the Sag Harbor Partnership now, and I'm wondering if there's an opening there. Are there communities that have done something with buying properties to make them more affordable for the types of businesses that you're talking about, that Eric is talking about, that you're talking about? Is there a model out there that Sag Harbor could pick up?
There is a model out there. I haven't done a ton of research on this, but I know, you know, in East Hampton Village also, there was East Hampton Village Preservation Society has looked at that, and I've had discussions with them about that, and there are models of that, you know, in the country, and that probably, you know,
how would it work? In broad strokes.
In broad strokes, I mean, you would have a separate entity, a not-for-profit, that would acquire the real estate, own the real estate, and then make it available to local small businesses.
Yeah. We're actually working on that.
Yeah.
You're actually say that?
Deputy Mayor Hayes been having conversations with me about doing this exact thing. So it's something that we're gonna
there is that model. I think the question is, how do you fund it? I mean, some of it is, you certainly philanthropy. You could, try to raise money, in the private sector to do that.
Is there any room left for another transfer
Yeah,
tax?
a role that, the Sag Harbor Partnership certainly could play a role in that. Is it something that, maybe the town should be thinking, is that something that would be a next generation CPF thing to participate in, to buy interest in property for that? I mean, we help farmers, we help the maritime community, that those are in the CPF. It would be a major change to the original intent, but again, everything has to adapt, so that would be something to...
Mayor, I don't want to bury the lead
So-
here. Talk about what you're doing at the Village Hall.
I had a discussion with the deputy mayor today about this very type of project or model for the CPF, and we're working on something that we're going to approach them with that says, right to this point. And there are non-for-profits out there that are looking to do stuff like that. So it's something that we're definitely exploring and looking into.
And if we think about the CPF, it started originally just for property. Then you added water quality, which was fantastic. Then you added the housing fund, which is fantastic. So if there's an element that we could introduce a new way to do this, because we do see this need.
I wanted to just follow up also just for a second on what Eric said. My experience after all the years in office is that we look at culture and the arts and the intrinsic value of that and what it does for the soul and what it does for us as human beings. But there is no greater generator out there for the economy than cultural institutions. I mean, the cinema and Bay Street Theater and the church, they have changed the village of Sag Harbor. The West Hampton Beach Performing Arts Center was the tip point that changed West Hampton Beach. So, Eric's point, and again, here we are in the church, but the point about creativity and culture in the arts, I mean, that is something that is a major asset that we have, that we should be thinking about how we can, take the next steps with that also.
Grania?
And I'd add one other asset to that too, and I completely agree. And I remember reading about the church when it was just an idea in the paper before we moved here, and I was like, another reason I want to be there. And that's exactly right. And we have these incredible institutions. The other place I would mention would be the Sag Harbor School. And last week, this community gave the school the biggest hug. I'm almost emotional in helping pass a bond that will, further the next multiple generations. And I think the school is a huge attraction to families in this village. And the families living here year-round are what keeps Sag Harbor so special compared to a lot of the other communities that, more of the houses go dead off-season and more of the shops close up. And I think having such a great school district and having families who live here, those families have a huge pride in this village. And that pride is exactly, concurrent to what Eric's talking about of, creativity and people having authenticity and wanting to be here and loving the village. And I think that's another great institution here.
So we have about 10 minutes left. I want to hurry up and give some people a chance to speak. If you could be.
Dana Trotter, I just have two quick points, and both Grania's points for me were amazing. One is, this seems like a very simple thing to me, maybe it's not. You all probably are familiar with Amagansett Square and Randy Lerner's space, where he requires his tenants to stay open year-round. Why can't we institute something like that so we don't see the "see you next summer" signs and people have to stay open year-round? That, to me, is one simple thing we could do for the village. The other just quick comment is that you just brought up, Grania, because I do think the year-round kids and the community are the school, people that use the schools. It breaks my heart that CPF and the school couldn't buy the Marsden lots. I drive by that now, and to me, it's, how is that saving Sag Harbor to see? I mean, and I'm in real estate, but I don't want to sell those 4 huge houses. That breaks my heart. So why that we couldn't figure out CPF and the school buying that for our future children to keep this village alive is, I mean, my kids are in high school, so it's not going to affect them, but I feel sorry for the people here that have young children.
Fred, real quickly, is there any mechanism for the village to require businesses to stay open?
I think Randy Lerner can do it. I'm not sure the
As
mayor
a
can do
landlord,
it.
right? Okay. Just to make that point.
No, because if
yeah.
Randy
I
Lerner
asked
owns
that
the
question.
property, he owns the
Legally, I
property,
can't do
so
it.
he can
If I
he
could
can
do it, I
that.
would, but I
we don't own.
Yeah.
We don't own them.
Yeah.
Can I go?
Yep.
Okay, first of all,
Introduce yourself, please, sir.
Robbie Stein, I'm former board member, a lot of things here. But currently, I'm the president of South Fork Bakery. And that's an organization that is completely community supported because it recognizes the kind of universality of the population. And the universality of the population here that's year-round is not a tourist community. So what do we do to change that? Again, we all know how complex the codes are and they interact. But I have just a different thought for a moment. Most of you, I assume, have doctors or dentists or therapists you go to. Please, when you redo the code, look at the office district because you're going to lose all of them. And then that is not going to help this community. And I'm saying that as a practicing psychoanalyst, not for the village. And there's a reason for that that's in the code too. I think there are 3 elevators in this village.
Yeah.
That doesn't work for people who are ill or older. So please, when you look at the community, think of the professional community and the office district as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Trying to get to everybody. I don't think we're going to fit you all in, but we're trying.
Thank you for being patient.
Thank you. I'm Jane Holden. My parents brought me to this community 80 years ago. We were the only family that lived in Redwood all year round for many years. I am also the agent who spent 18 months putting together the deal for them to purchase Redwood Anchorage and keep it so that local people can have a place to moor their boats and park their boats. When you talk about letting people put garages or apartments on their property, the one thing you throw in, which is wrong, is that you want to have control of who they can rent it to for the next 20 years. That keeps people from wanting to spend the money to do that. I've spent my whole career, 45 years of selling real estate, mostly to try and keep young people and people who wanted to add to this community in here. We need to do something. My oldest daughter's oldest son is married, and they would love to buy a house. He has a very good job. He's got a very good education. They can't afford to buy anything. A house next door to me is a little 3-bedroom, 2-bath that just dropped to $1,450,000. How do you think a young 20-year-old couples are going to afford this? I took part in selling a lot of the historic houses on Main Street, and I was happy to see them look beautiful. But we lost 30 to 40 rentals on Main Street from Main Street to up by the park. Those houses had 1, 3, and some had 5 rentals in them.
Jane, let me ask you, how does that affect the business district?
It affects it because the people can't afford to live here, so they don't go in the village to shop. Now, I worked for Brown Harris Stevens in the fall. They said, let's write up, can you put up a little thing on different stores in Sag Harbor? So I put something in on the wharf shop, the fact that if you're 1 or 100, there's something in that store that'll be good for you. They were so thrilled. And I also put the 5 and 10. And I look at these young real estate brokers and I say, do you tell people the advantage of going to the 5 and 10 to going to the wharf shop? And that's the problem. People do not talk and say, take a carriage, walk around. You'll be shocked at what you found that you forgot you needed. And they have it. I mean, I used to buy my butterick patterns when I was a teenager, making my own clothes. My mother always got her buttons for the sweaters she made. There's anything in there you can think of, but people have to talk and encourage people to go in there. It breaks my heart to see the people, you know, and my son was away, he came home, took me to dinner. We were trying to go to the hotel. We had to go 3 trips around Main Street at 7 o'clock at night because all the parking places were taken. And he said, where do all these people come from? We are a place people want to be, but we got to figure out a way how to get the young people to be able to be here.
Thank you, Jane. Appreciate it. We have a couple minutes left. I do want to give folks a chance to speak.
Sorry. Bob Weinstein, like Eric, and I'm going to stay in my seat, I think, at this point. I'm co-president of Save Sag Harbor. I'm speaking for myself, however. A few things I want to kind of push back on. Tim and I have spoken about pattern book before. I think the best pattern book available in Sag Harbor is what's here physically in Sag Harbor. You know, if we have to tell developers anything, tell them to walk around the village with their eyes open and they can see what Sag Harbor's all about. I don't think we have to go through the process of providing drawings and books like that. Just what's here should be the template for what's coming. I mean, Sag Harbor ain't broken, so why try to fix it, right? And as far as what Eric said about creativity, I mean, bringing that back to retail, I think when I think about the worst thing that could happen in Sag Harbor is for the mom and pops and the individual or the small chain stores like Love Shack Fancy or whatever, you know, for those to disappear, probably for 2 reasons. 1, because the rents have gotten so high, and 2, because Sag Harbor has become so popular, we're almost the you know, we become the place to be, and the argument of, you know, keeping size limitations as a guard against chain stores coming into the village, which is actually what started Save Sag Harbor 10 or 15 years ago when CVS came. We very smartly had size limitations. That, as has been pointed out by the board, is no longer really going to be our best line of defense. I think I come out of retail, by the way. I don't mean I was just in a store and I just left. I mean, my career was around retail, branding and design in the retail sector. And there's probably no better advertisement for any store that's trying to be considered kind of hip or cool than to be in Sag Harbor at this point. I mean, look at Goop. The panel has all said this. You know, I think it's important for us to really concentrate on that. And if we lose the creativity in these little mom and pop stores and start having chain stores like Gap and whatever, that is the demise of Sag Harbor. So we might not be able to get to the degree that Eric's talking about, things that are, you know, creative to that degree that an artist like Eric would envision, but a mom and pop store, I think, is the level of creativity that we have to aspire to, if you will, as opposed to the sort of generic you know, retail chains that are out there. I think that's the key thing. It can't be about just limiting size, although I commend you, Tom. We talked about this morning. I think that's a good start, but that's not going to be the line of defense that we need. We really need to find some way to be able to keep the national chains from coming to the store, or that I think would be the end of Sag Harbor as we know it.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. We don't have a ton of time left, so I want to, if we could keep our answers quick here.
Hi, Peter Gannay. I'm also on the board of Save Sag Harbor, and I've lived here my whole life. My dad used to have an office over Marty's Barbershop on Main Street. And I just wanted to go back to what we were talking about before about organizations, entities that might help with the piece that we haven't really talked about. It's been mentioned once or twice, which is rents. And as Fred said, the zoning code's a blunt instrument, and I don't think you can totally code your way out of the problem here. Landlords and rents are a very big piece of it. In Nantucket, they have an organization, a not-for-profit called Remain Ventures, which was started to preserve vibrant local ownership in their downtown district. It bought the space where a community bookstore that people felt was really important to the community was, and that's an ongoing bookstore. I think they've bought another location that's been used as sort of a incubator for food service and restaurants. Maybe there will be a role for an organization like that to create a creative, artworks or artisan incubator. And so there's a really good model that I'm aware of there, and maybe we should perfect Nantucket again in that way, and certainly something like the CPF could have a role, I would think.
Thank you, Peter. I think someone right here.
I want to add to that.
Sorry,
April Gornick. To Peter's point, which I think was well made, I think we don't have to think quite in binary terms here. Like, it doesn't have to, like, I was thinking a public-private partnership, as has been done in Nantucket, would be great. But maybe there needs to be like a whole attitude that affects this village that we could even express to people. Like, we have banners on the street right now for the second Saturdays that we're doing over the winter. Maybe there's like just a little bit of a subliminal message that we send to people who come here, that we're the way we are because we're a community that believes in the same thing fundamentally. We believe in, for one of the first things we did at the church was to ask Lisa Field to come and talk, because I have this bee in my bonnet about there's creativity in so many things that people don't recognize. And keeping a business afloat for 100 years, 2 families having done that, that's creativity. That is a form of it. And I think that we don't have to, it doesn't have to be like art is creative and business isn't. Like, if we can think more as really what this place represents, I think to most of us here, because you sense it in the architecture, in the history, in the variety of things that are offered, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and in the cultural institutions, of course. But if we can somehow transmit that to people who come here, who don't understand, I'm not saying they're all going to get it, because I don't think that's possible. And the developers who come in are a perfect example of this, because they have zero idea of what they're getting into. They're just thinking about, this isn't developed enough, I could make so much money here. And it's so the opposite of why people who love this place live here. So just throwing that out is like, let's not go binary on this. I hate the idea of like thinking about art versus business. It's like, to me, it's all like part of the creative endeavor of making a place that's wonderful to live in.
It's great stuff. Thanks, April. 1 or 2 more comments, please.
Hi. My name is Nancy Greenberg, and I've lived here permanently for the last 20 years. And what I think is not maybe being discussed, or it's a different aspect of how to preserve not only Main Street, but our little, community. The corner bar is going out of business, or it's selling. I don't know the backstory. It's been there for 30-something years. The thing that frightens me is that if it has to be another restaurant, because it has to be a restaurant, I don't know, it's going to be another shishi restaurant that nobody can afford. And Sag Harbor is becoming unaffordable. The restaurants, are crazy out here. And I know they have high rents, and I know, it's a vicious cycle. But Lynn Sylvester had to leave because everybody was buying online. And she was just losing business, and she had one wonderful, wonderful shop. And Sam's Pizza is going in East Hampton, and that's been there for years. Not that change is bad, but there's got to be, I think, some control. And when Dockside went out, that was reasonably priced. Okay, the place that's there now is just outrageous, and they said they wanted to be. Seed a farm or whatever, land to farm to table. No, but from the water. No, from the ship, from the water, from the fishing, from the fishing. And I looked at their menu the first time, and I thought it was going to be, oh great, it's going to be a raw bar, it's going to be community, it's going to be, and it's like Bill Bouquet. It's crazy. It's crazy. So how does that get control and keep people here that have been working here all their lives?
Anybody have an answer to that?
Let me just say something about the corner bar. So Jimmy Smythe, I don't know how many people here know Jimmy, but Jimmy was the founder and owner of the corner bar. And he could have sold that place probably 100 times over. But he didn't want to do that because that was his bar. His buddies would come in there. When I was fire chief, I'd go in there, and Jimmy would see me, and he'd come over, and he'd be like, "Hey, how are the bastards treating you?" You know, stuff like that. So he was the people. That's what Sag Harbor is. It's about the community. So we lose somebody like a Jimmy Smythe, but we gain a Grania and a Rory. So there is going to be change. Things are going to change. What can we do as an administration to keep the feel and character of the village? We're going to do. We're going to explore everything we can. But it's ultimately about the people. The fact that everybody's here discussing this is what Fred said in the beginning, is that the voices that are coming to the administration and have this passion to keep the village, that's what's going to keep us going, is the interaction and the participation. I met with Bob and Save Sag Harbor a couple weeks ago. They told me we addressed their concerns. So there's an open dialogue between the community, the village board. We have village residents on all the boards. So ultimately, it's about the people. We can't lose our people. That's the bottom line. And passing things that we do to try to help that, like the ADU law, the accessory apartment law. People have come up to me and said, we would have had to leave, but now I can make an apartment for my mother-in-law or for my mother, and she can stay and help. And because there are generational families in the village. That's the families that are staying, they're generational. So anything that we can do to help keep the people here, that's what's important.
Let me take maybe one or two last comments. Go ahead.
My name is Lee Skolnick. I'm an architect here in Sag Harbor. I actually came here the same year that the corner bar opened in 1978. It's almost 50 years. And I've spoken with Tom, I've spoken with Jim over the past several years, and I really don't believe that a pattern book is what this village is about. This village is actually about creativity and making something out of the circumstances that are current at any period of time, creative problem solving. And you don't, I mean, if we had a pattern book that said these buildings need to look like old buildings, I mean, I know I'm an architect saying this, but that's almost sacrilegious. All of the buildings in this village look the way they do for a reason. And the reason is they're a reflection or an embodiment of people's values, taste, beliefs at any given time. We have to move forward because the village is not going to go backwards. And we have to find a way to, when we talk about a vision, it's not a look. It's a spirit. It's what Eric was saying. And that spirit of openness, when we designed the church with Eric and April, we made it as open-ended as it could possibly be. And I come in here all the time, and there are concerts, there are dance performances, there are retail, Christmas shops. It works because people breathe the creativity themselves into the environment. And Sag Harbor has always been that way. I mean, the reason that we have this incredible array, melange of different architectural styles, they may all seem old. They're really not that old. We're talking about a few hundred years. It's not like we're working on Roman ruins in Bulgaria right now. That's old. But here, if we could just establish a vision, not a look, but a vision, maybe even in words, of what is the essence of Sag Harbor. We all agree about it. Everything that someone has said, that people have said tonight, nothing contradicts anything else except for the pattern book. But if we don't harness the creativity of people today, then we're doing a disservice to the history of this town, this village.
Lee, you may have just come up with the definition of quirky. It's that there's been so many different types of styles over the years that have survived that you have.
They all had meaning behind them. And, when we talk about these developers, I met with the developer who shouldn't be mentioned ever again, who wanted to do the big project behind Scavoni's. And he showed me the renderings that he was going to take to the village. And I said, you can't do this. And he said, well, why it looks just like Sag Harbor. I said, this does not look like Sag Harbor. It's a bad version of historic pastiche. And that's not what Sag Harbor is about. Sag Harbor is about authenticity. It's about creativity. And the church has embodied that and is the greatest, probably, example of it. But we need to raise the bar to that level because the village is worth it.
It's not a good express session until WLIW has to beep something. And so we got there. Thank you for that, Lee. One more, and we'll be done.
Thanks. I'm Dan Marsilli. My comment is not about affordable housing, but it's about affordability. And it relates to, I think, Lisa's and others' comments about Main Street. And it's about attracting young families. And everybody has said it increasingly becomes something that seems a bit hopeless as houses, start to exceed $3 and $4 million in the village. And my family and I were part of that problem. 18 years ago, our first home in Sag Harbor, we bought from Jane Holden, and it was a beautiful captain's house that was in 3 apartments that we converted to a single-family home, which at the time we were celebrated for. It was the beautiful gentrification of a house that had fallen in disrepair, and I realize now that's part of a continuous problem in this village that now I think we're experiencing. So I'm thinking of similar, coincidentally, seafaring past environments like Newport, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Provincetown, Massachusetts, all very similar problems over the years about affordability. And they first created more open code to conversion of homes the other way. We have an inordinate amount of investors that buy these homes up around the village. And what do? They really put a tremendous amount of money in, and there's a couple that, are shocking on Main Street. I'm saying Madison Street in excess of $10 million, just really shocking prices, but they've put a lot of money in these things to flip them. We should probably think, I realize this is tough, but a long-term strategy of kind of turning that on its end and create tax abatement potential for folks to actually convert some of these beautiful homes back into apartments that doesn't hurt the character of the village. We have examples of that. I think the home on Suffield or Suffolk Street that CPF and I think the cinema collaborated on. There's a beautiful 19th century home on the corner of Hempstead and Hampton that we're keeping as 3 apartments, but yet it coexists with beautiful homes in the village. So I think long term, we could think through a strategy of getting affordability into these homes by having them converted back, at least where it's not seen inside, to homes where families could live. And we should be able to allow them over time with proper, code and whatnot to convert them into condominiums like a lot of other cities and small towns have done. So something to think about for the future.
Thank you for that.
So one of the first things when I came into talking about affordability and affordable housing, and Dan's point is that, and Fred had brought this up at a previous, we had something here at the church and we were talking about affordable housing. And what Fred said stuck with me so much is that you're not going to be able to build your way out of this problem. So the first thing I did was identify those houses. I said, let's do a study behind the scenes. I said, let's collect and see where all these multi-family houses are and identify where they are. How many have gotten sold, as in your case, and became from multi-family to single-family homes. Let's identify them when they come on the market. Fred, thank God, we got that 0.5%, right, for the housing. We'll approach the CPF and we'll have them, so Suffolk Street through the partnership and the cinema, that's one on the Southampton side. With David Lease is here from East Hampton. He helped us with the house that you're talking about, the big Victorian 109 Hampton Street. And we had some money in our affordable fund to purchase that. Those people are staying, they're not going. So we've identified these properties. As they come up, we're going to approach the CPF and say, look, boom, here's one on the market. But again, you got to have a willing seller. That's the key. So if you got that, then we can purchase those homes as they come up for
It's
sale.
CHF, by the way.
CHF,
Yeah,
right.
Just to be clear. Folks, I hope you'll put your hands together one more time and help me thank the entire panel who came out today. Thank you also to Eric and April and the folks here at the church, to WLIW, to our sponsors. So we are going to have a little gathering in the back. There's some, as Gavin said, there's some refreshments. You know, we're too small of a company to really have a mission statement for express sessions, but if we did, I think we would say that the whole point of it is to plant seeds, having conversations that really get conversations going, that really make things happen. I think tonight was a really good example of that. Let's keep it going tonight. So thank you all for being here, and let's keep the conversation going.